G'day guys, welcome back to Lab. Hey, here's something funny to start the video. Just had an argument on the internet, what a surprise, eh? With an American who reckons carburetors can make more power than EFI. Yes, it's true. It's 2020 and people still think like that. Hey, right, let's get on with what we're doing today. So this beastie here, we talked about this crank angle sensor boss or mount or whatever you want to call it. We talked about getting the, it's a bit bright, isn't it? Getting the sensor to line up with the middle, trigger wheel to line up with the middle of the sensor is what I'm trying to say, and failing. That's really bright, you guys won't be able to see that. So what's happened is, a bit of a tweak, a bit of a fiddle with that surface, as I said, and now we can jam that in there. Oh, don't worry, I've got it slightly crooked that time, so that it's not necessarily going to line up as it should do. It goes in there, and we take it back out and we have a look. And we're in the middle now, except for the fact that I put it in slightly crooked to start off with. So that will work significantly better than what it was going to before. It was going to cause issues before. It should be all right now. So I had to re-tap that hole that was a bit bungy, so it's good now. Hopefully there'll be no more issues with that. Although I do need another one of these for some reason. This one's gone walkabout and I borrowed it from the cam angle sensor. Happens to be the same. Quite handy to have the same sensor all around the place. I'll buy him a brand new one of these. I'm pretty sure it was there to start with and it's just gone walkabout. I've probably used it on something else, the March or whatever. So sort him out one of those. That's that sorted out. So the whole clutch and everything, all that's been checked out and that's all going to work okay. Now this has got a plastic master slave cylinder in it. They do cause issues. They fail, they crack, they explode. So I'll have a chat with him and see if he wants to upgrade that before we put it all together. We don't want to have this slot here up in here and have the slave cylinder fail. And we've got to take the exhaust manifolds off to get the gearbox out. It's actually not going to be all that easy because of the way things work. So we don't want that, so I'll get that sorted out for him. Okay, so after a bit of a false start, we are on Dynapack Dyno, and time for a tune. I have to be honest, this is the second attempt. This is the second time the car was on the dyno. First time we didn't even start the tuning, and everyone decided we just weren't happy with that noise that was in the engine. As you can hear, that's gone now. As it turns out, what had happened was, when the engine was originally built, before that camshaft was destroyed, the front and rear bearing caps for the inlet camshaft had been swapped over. That's why we had oil supply issue to the cam lobes, and that's why our variable cam timing wasn't functioning. At least not at idle. It probably would have worked at higher RPM, but it wasn't right. It is now. Don't worry about that noise you're hearing. That noise is coming from the fan. It's not the car going clunk, 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 clunk. Okay, so Dave's going to work his magic soon. Hopefully we don't run into too many headaches and we'll see how it goes. I think it made 220 kilowatts in the past. Let's see what it does today. Oh, 297. There you go, Brock. There's your number. And some just for safety factor. Yeehaw! Thank you, Dave. That's great. Okay, so we're back home. There's everything looking all pretty. No massive oil leaks or anything. There's one small oil leak. It's nothing to do with what we've been working on. It's the timing chain cover below the head down in here. In between that and the sump, there's a little timing chain cover. Unfortunately, it's just weeping out in between the head and that. So it's not an easy one to fix. It's something the owner can tackle at a later date, because we've run out of time. But here's our dyno sheet. Sorry if that doesn't show up all that well on your computer screen. It doesn't look bad from here. It might not look good on your screen. If you're watching on a phone, it'll be rubbish. But so the red line at the bottom here, that's basically as it was when we put on the dyno for the first time without fiddling with anything. I think you just checked the things were going to be safe and just gave it a run just to see where we were at. Cam timing was all over the place, not working properly. Ignition timing was quite significantly retarded. I think the car might have been tuned with the distributor quite advanced from where it was. Sorry, let's call it a crank angle sensor, not a distributor. There it is. There. When I took it apart and put new camshafts in the car and tried to put that back where it was, the car wouldn't run. So then I investigated that, set that up as per the factory position, and I think that's what's happened there. I think it might have been one tooth advanced to start with on its original tune. So what you see there is not necessarily because the fuel map and everything was all rubbish. It's potentially lost quite a lot of power just because the timing was quite retarded. It was idling at 0 degrees, which is not where you want it. You want like 10 degrees advance or something like that. So that's done, that's fixed. Anyway, and the red line there, the next red line up, that is on low boost setting. So that's about 14 psi. Whatever it's making there, it's like 240 kilowatts or something like that, isn't it? It's probably 245. It might be the green one. Not sure why those numbers don't line up with the colors on the traces, but don't worry about that. And then the green line there, that's what we've left the car at. That's our safe air tune. And the yellow line, that's what it made peak. So it made 306 kilowatts. There was still heaps more in it. The customer only wanted 300 kilowatts. So we got to that pretty easily. I was like, okay, we'll leave that at that. We'll pull it back a little bit so it's a bit safer. And done deal. It's a little bit of a mess to clean up in the car. So I've got to get on with that. So this red wire has to go. This is currently, that's powering the wideband O2 unit. That's its main power supply from the battery, the one that's not switched. We had to put that in because it didn't actually have that. So although the wideband sensor was in the car and it had the unit, it was never able to run. Along with the variable cam timing was not switching correctly, so that would have never worked properly either. So quite good that we've come across those little problems and fixed it. Now, bit of a confession to make. I took the car over, it was booked for a tune on Tuesday. The tune that you just saw, that was Thursday. So I went over there on Tuesday, knew that the engine was a little bit noisy. It would have heard that noise. We all thought maybe VCT. I did check on the price of a new VCT gear. They were pretty expensive. They were, was it 1400 retail or something like that, and 3 months from Japan. So that wasn't really an option. I didn't really want to go ahead and just buy one. Kind of figured that that's where the problem was at. The variable cam timing wasn't working. So I powered up the solenoid here. Just put 12 volts across the 2 pins inside that plug, and nothing happened. Just sat there and made no difference. Now, I wasn't onto it enough at the time to put 2 and 2 together. When we took the cam cover off the top of the motor, this thing had not been running. I hadn't seen it running here at my place. It'd been running in the past elsewhere, right? Obviously that's how the camshaft got worn out, but it hadn't been running here. So the end bearing cap down here under the cover was not supplying enough oil into the bar that runs along the top to supply oil to the cam followers. I figured it was something to do with someone had over-torqued it and crushed it into the bolt and created not enough clearance for the oil to come through to the banjo fitting. Looked into that, checked the bar was okay, cleaned out the bar was fine, opened up the clearance for that bolt. Now we've got oil pressure and we're lubricating our camshaft. At that point, I thought problem solved, fixed it. Random, really weird, but it's fixed. Then, after we'd put the new camshaft in it and new followers and done all the fittings on the cam cover here and put all this back together, and then had the car running, and that's when I found the variable cam timing was not working. I should have, at that point, clicked that the two problems were very related, but it didn't. It wasn't until we took it over, ran it here, I wasn't overly happy with the noise, but it wasn't terrible. I didn't think it'd be a big problem. Took it over to DTEC. It seemed louder there, to be honest. And Dave was like, I don't really want to tune that while it's got a problem like that. We need to sort that out. So I took it away, brought it back home, and never even took it off the trailer, to be honest. I just popped the bonnet. Thought, I'm going to have another look at all this area here, and see what the hell's going on, because it'll be something simple, surely. We've got oil pressure there. I knew we had oil pressure, and I knew the cam solenoid was working, but the VCT gear was not working. It didn't make any sense. So I pulled the cam cover off. I took the bearing caps off, front and rear bearing caps. That's when I realized that at some point in time, when that head had been apart, someone had swapped those around, so the one that's supposed to be on the back was on the front, and the one that's supposed to be on the front was on the back. So you still had oil flow to both journals, so it wasn't seizing anything up. You just didn't have oil flow to your bar to lubricate all the cam lobes, and you didn't have enough oil flow to make the variable cam gear work. So that's how you get caught out by other people making mistakes at some point in time. Here's a really awesome computer-generated work of art for you to understand it a bit better. This is a variable cam timing gear. They have a little piston. In one of my older videos, we showed a slightly different system this uses, but they have a little piston inside there with a very coarse thread on it. So as the piston comes backwards and forwards, it changes the relation of the cog to the camshaft. That's how you advance and retard. In the head, there's a bolt hole there and a bolt hole there. There's an oil hole just there. That's for the oil to flow through. What it should have at the front is a little groove inside the bearing journal there, so that the oil flows through the two little pinholes in the end of the camshaft here that go through to control the cam gear. At the other end, it's only got a little notch out of it to let the oil flow to the journal. It's got a little pinhole. I've drawn it in the wrong end actually, sorry, my bad. That little pinhole should be over here for the oil hole that's in the head. That's my bad drawing. Things were starting to run into each other. Get over it. So that's enough for the oil flow to the journal there, to keep that all lubricated. With the pen's just here, let's draw a picture. With the rear one, what it has is, here's a bolt. It's quite hard drawing this through the screen, I'll look past it, eh? Here's bolt head, here's a banjo fitting, and that has the tube on it that goes to lubricate all the cam lobes. The bearing cap that's on there is supposed to have clearance from that bolt like that, and sorry, that then steps in. I've drawn that quite wrong. Here's the outside of it. It steps in here. Inside here is a hole like that. That hole lines up with the hole that's in the head, and you get oil comes through here, past the bolt, up here into your bar, supplies oil. Because it was the wrong cap, this cap that's supposed to be at the front here, it does not have this. That just comes down like that. So you still get oil. That's supposed to come through and go into, how's it done? It's supposed to come through past here, I believe, and into the actual bearing where the camshaft runs around, and it's got that groove that I've shown you up here, and that's somehow they joined that hole up whatever the path is inside here for the oil to go from in here into here to make the bloody VCT work. Enough talking from me. So there it is. 300, well, it's 294 or something kilowatts at the hubs now, but it'll make 300 on a cold day, probably. Slight tweak. Like if he runs half a PSI more boost, it'll do it. But there you go. So the pretty good result. Turned into a bigger job than what it was supposed to be. Originally it was just bolt the manifold on, bolt the turbo on, do the plumbing, make a downpipe for it, and the intake pipe, just modify that one pipe to go onto the turbo and an air filter. That's all it was going to be. And then it turned into catch can, and then it turned into the battery didn't fit and the battery was flat, and then it turned into the alternator was overcharging when the headlights were on, and then it turned into the VCT wasn't working and the inlet camshaft was broken, worn out, not broken. And then the O2 sensor was not working at all. Dave from DTEC fixed that. And there we are. It's a good car. Right, so they're going to come pick this up today. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to replace that wire. And cheers for watching. And catch you all later. Cheers, bye.